Hey everybody, welcome to Marching Arts Education. This is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts, and we are going to have a really interesting and helpful conversation tonight. We are talking about preparing for concert festival adjudication, and we have two ringers on the line with us tonight. Darcy Radcliffe is here. Darcy, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I appreciate you stopping in the middle of concert preparation with your group to be here. And Frank Petrik is with us. Frank, how are you?
Doing very well, Tim. Thank you. Glad to be here as well.
Yeah, so glad you guys are here. So Darcy, I think everybody probably knows who you guys are, but Darcy, introduce yourself if you would.
Okay, my name is Darcy Radcliffe, and I'm a high school orchestra director, and I live in Lubbock, Texas, which is in the Panhandle area of Texas. I've taught for I think this is my 23rd year as a public school teacher, and I'm in an area where I am starting a brand new orchestra program after having taught elsewhere for 21 years. So this is my second year with a brand new program starting from scratch. And I'm the coordinator for the district and oversee middle school, but I'm preparing high school orchestra for UIL, which is coming up pretty fast.
Okay, so you are working with all the different levels, but you are right now working with your high school group to get them ready for their concert performance.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Frank, let's hear about you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think the last time that we spoke, I was at David Douglas Middle School here in Portland, Oregon, and I am kind of in the similar situation. I have just taken on Lincoln High School, so I'm first year there, so I'm kind of going through the same thing of starting fresh again. I've been an educator here in Oregon. This is my 26th year, and just looking forward to being able to work with a new group, and also Oregon Band Directors Association president for Oregon Band Directors, and stay pretty active within everything that happens here in Oregon.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for being here. Listen, everybody, this is going to be practical information, right? So things that you can go back to your group and use right away. So what's interesting is both of you are sort of in new situations. So you have to teach your students, I would assume, why are we doing this? Why is it important? So Darcy, that's something you mentioned before. So let's start there. Why do concert festivals?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm really in those beginning stages of trying to still create culture within these new students that are new to orchestra. So they don't really know what an orchestra kid is yet. They're still thinking like a band kid or a choir kid or a theater kid. So that's been one of the challenges of this position. But why I think part of the reason why we do adjudicated concerts or festivals is because we have no choice. We have to, or because we need something to motivate our students. And so for me, it's both. I kind of want to get an adjudicated contest experience in the bloodstream of these students so that they have a sense of this is what we're working towards. And give them that goal to work towards, and also get some feedback from somebody other than myself. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people do adjudicated events.
Okay, it's interesting you said that, because I do know of some places that I have worked with where it was not a requirement. And so there were some directors who chose not to, which of course I thought was not necessarily the smartest choice. But so the fact that it's required for you is, I think, a good thing, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it can go both ways. Sometimes, it's like, let me choose because I'm the director and I know what I'm dealing with, and don't force me to do something that we're not ready for. I mean, there's that thinking. But I think also it really can make you a better director if you know how to view this experience in a way that will strengthen you. And I think that perspective and that mindset is something that we probably should talk about today, because that can totally change the experience for yourself and for your students if you have a helpful perspective, an open heart, a willingness to learn.
Yeah, Frank, it's got to be really interesting. You're setting your students up for this, and it'd be interesting to see what the culture was there.
Yeah, it's very similar. I'm creating a new culture there. The number one thing for me this year in going into my group is to build community. Right now, my main philosophy is the we is greater than the me. And I've created a leadership team that is really bought on to the system, and I'm putting a lot of students into the leadership position so they can create that that leadership component within the group to build that culture. As far as festival here in Oregon, we're a little different than other areas. We have a championships, which is through the Oregon School Athletics and Activities, OSAA, and we have different levels as other districts, but we have basically you go through your districts and you compete. And so there's a lot of groups out there that I think we have a pretty good balance. I think a lot of the band directors here go in with a mindset of you're competing against yourselves, and we're really trying to build that culture of we're creating music, but we're also in that position of being scored, which really brings up a lot of different perspectives on that. So, and I think as a director, and Darcy, you probably would agree on this, it's a matter of how you framework that with your students. And I have always told my students, I said, listen, if we make it to state, great. If we don't, that's fine too. All I'm asking you to do is just do the best you can, and let's make great music. And if you can walk off the stage and tell me if you gave everything that you had, that's a win for me. And we've been very successful over the years. My bands have gone to state multiple times, but I've always kept that idea and that framework of we're doing this to create great music and to be a band and really enjoy the moment. And I said, if you compete with yourself and we do well, then that's great. If not, it's fine. You did your best.
Yeah, your best is good enough. Right. I've seen two different things happen. I've also judged many contests over the years. And, I remember one time seeing a director come in and tell the students, hey, we just are almost done. We just got to get through this next little bit, and then we get to go eat dinner and go home. And I thought, oh, missed opportunity. Because that is one way to look at it. Look at it as we're forced to do this. We don't want to be here. What a drag. Or you could look at it as we get to go perform. We get to get out there together and go make magic happen on the stage collectively with all of us together. And what a fantastic opportunity. And maybe the judges will love it. Maybe they won't, but we want to go in there with see it as an opportunity to perform, see it as an opportunity to grow, and then you've also got to think through, are we competing against ourselves? Are we competing for a perfect score? Are we competing against someone else? There's all different kinds of contests that happen. Some are just looking for first place, and some are just looking for a perfect score. For our contests in Texas public schools that are required, you're just aiming for a perfect score. So there is a rubric that you're looking at, and you're trying to think through, how are we matching up with this rubric? Are we landing in the top level, or are we down here at the bottom? And it can be helpful. And that's one thing that I always say to student teachers is go get familiar with the rubric that contest is using or that festival is using, so that you understand what it is that people are going to be listening for. And that can make a really big difference as you go through this process of preparing for a contest.
Yeah, I can tell you that I was really lucky when I was directing years ago, is that it wasn't competitive, and I liked that. It was, and if actually it wasn't even scored except for 1, 2, 3, superior, excellent, etc. And so we were just going by a standard of trying to get that superior rating. And I found that really healthy for my students, because that was sort of a big picture goal. And then I could define that within my own program of, well, here's what that means for our music with our program, where we're trying to grow, where we started, all that stuff. So the idea of having to compete and get scored and try to beat other bands in the concert arena is pretty foreign to me personally. But I do know that is a part of it in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so, but ultimately, you both made the point that we're just trying to make great music. We're trying to grow as a program, get better. And as long as I think anybody's keeping that global overall message in mind, I think we're all going to be okay. So let's get into some nuts and bolts. We're getting ready. Frank, what tips did you come up with that you would want someone to know?
I think the most important thing is preparation. I have been thinking about, well, first of all, coming into a new group, you have to figure out where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, where do you have places that can grow, and the literature selection and repertoire selection is key to their success. That has given me a lot of anxiety in different times. And then it's just like, did I find something that fits them? Is this going to be too challenging? So I think just choosing the right repertoire that suits the band's skill level, that challenges them, but will get them to a point where they feel successful is really a key component of getting prepared. I think that's the number one thing for me, is just knowing my group, knowing where I can highlight them to where they feel good about going out. And I never want to put someone out on the stage and make them feel like they're not going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. I think that brings up a good point as far as picking literature, because you have to really know it. You have to know a lot of it to be able to go, that piece would be perfect for this group, And when you're a young teacher or a newer teacher to the subject, it's like, how do you figure that out? One thing that I do, especially when I'm stumped and I'm like, nothing's quite landing right with the group, I'll sometimes go and look at other contests that have happened in previous years and look at the programming. What did this director at this school program for their contest? And it might get me thinking in a different vein than I would have if I hadn't looked at some other perspectives, because you're right, picking the literature can make or break a contest, and it's something that you have to live with for a long time. I mean, how many weeks and months are you playing through some of those same pieces of music, depending on how hard it is and where it falls on the calendar. I mean, I think it's so funny with Christmas music when parents realize that you start that in October. It's like we're living with this stuff and we know it deeply. But just kind of gathering some perspectives on how to program. And then to that point, I've also noticed as a judge, or when I've worked with people as a clinician, sometimes their choices are not really, there's not enough to the music. Maybe they've programmed on the easy side, or it's just popular, or it's just something that the kids like, but there's not anything that's really got a lot of weight or merit to it. And so that's something else to consider. You don't want to just do, pop tunes. You want to think about quality literature, because this is education as well.
Yeah, and that can become quite the challenge, but it's also fun. I find that challenge is probably the most fun that I have. And then, like you said, we have the same here in Oregon. We have a literature required literature list, and we're in a position where we actually can submit pieces to be accepted or grant permission to be able to do that. So it gives us a little more flexibility. So, which is great.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So Darcy, what was one of the points that you came in with that you would want to share?
Well, I think rehearsal, and Frank already mentioned this a little bit, but just you pick the literature, and it's got to be something that works for a number of reasons. But then, how's your preparation going? How are your rehearsals going? Because the way your rehearsals go, the way your warm-up goes is how your rehearsal goes, right? And then how your rehearsal goes is how your performance goes. And so you want to make sure that your rehearsals are effective. I know I've grown as a teacher and a musician when I've sat down and I've really studied that rubric, and I've listened with a critical ear to what's happening in my classroom. And that's helped me quite a bit to think about things differently. And then in that preparation, I think we all get this way, where you just heard it so many times that you need fresh ears. So having a trusted fellow teacher, musician, director that can come in along that way while you're in the rehearsal process, that can give you some feedback, I've found to be really, really helpful.
So I agree with that. Have you guys ever recorded your group and then listened back to it later? Because sometimes when you're on the podium, you're not necessarily hearing it the way it really is.
Right. Yeah.
So that used to be really helpful to me. Not that I want to sit and listen to a whole rehearsal, but let's record this section or play through it one time, whatever. I think sometimes when you listen to it off sitting at home, it can be eye-opening?
Oh, I don't want to listen to it at home.
Fair enough.
Well, one thing that I've been doing in my preparation, and again, this is a new program, but I try to give the students autonomy as soon as I can. And so, especially when you feel like they're just not understanding what you're hearing, I'll record them and play it back immediately. Not the whole piece, but a section of it, and say, tell me what you're noticing, what you're hearing, and let them realize they're the ones that are going to have to make that change, because you can say it over and over and over again, but if they don't believe it or if they don't hear it themselves, then you're kind of stuck, So I don't know if that's something that you both have employed as well, but now with technology, you can do that so much faster than you used to be able to. Just pull out your phone, record it, play it back. It can be really helpful.
Yeah, so I think that's a great idea, and being able for them to hear it, and for them to be, as you're saying, let them be the critical ear. Oh, wow, we're not together there, or geez, the violas are out of tune. Oh, sorry, viola, shouldn't have chosen them. That was not, don't want to pile on.
No joke.
Sorry, didn't mean that. Okay, good. Frank, anything around these lines, or what else did you have that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I want to go back to one thing that Darcy said is about judging and being out there. I think that's a really great thing for new band directors and old band directors to go out. And I've sat at these festivals and sat right next to a judge. It just really brings, first of all, it gives you an opportunity to see what the judges are listening for. And I did this because we have to be certified here in Oregon to be judges. So we have a certification process. And as a young band director, I was like, well, I think I hear what I'm hearing. I don't, and then the real difficult part is like, how do you fix that? Mm-hmm. And you can hear that it's like the second trombone is flat, or, you get this situation, but how do you fix that? And how do you give back that feedback? So I think going and listening and sitting next to judges, being a part of that, is a great way to become a better educator, and ultimately being able to run more efficient rehearsals. Yeah. And then you always have in mind, like, what are the judges going to be listening for? And I think that really sets you up for success within your rehearsals.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. I just wanted to add on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Getting inside the mind of a judge, and to kind of tag on to what you're saying, having a clinician that can come in that understands, that is a judge or has been a judge, or is a skilled educator, that's an effective educator, can really help as well. How many times have we said, violins, your third finger's flat whenever you play the D sharp on your A string, and you say it, you say it, and you say it, you say it. Somebody else walks in and says it, and they go, "Oh, we believe you now." So it can be helpful for a number of reasons. Plus, they just bring some fresh energy to it. And I don't know about you, but when somebody walks into my room, like I was observed today by a principal, for example, somebody walks in and you go, all of a sudden you start hearing things that you didn't hear before. You hear differently because you've got this adult that, you're like, oh, am I missing, are they not together? And I never noticed it before. It does heighten your sense of awareness to have another person in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
How formalized do you guys typically do that? Because I know some people just bring somebody in for a rehearsal, a clinician or something, but sometimes I used to have like a pre-concert concert.
Yeah.
And I bring clinicians in to sort of do a sample of scoring it and making comments. So yeah. Is that something that people typically do? Or do you guys do that as well? Have a concert with adjudication that's not the official one?
Yes.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
So talk about how you set that up in case somebody doesn't know how that works. Like Frank, how would you set that up at your school?
Oh, I've done that prior, especially when we're going into state championships. I've done it probably the week before state championships, and I do it for the community to come and listen. So set that up just like a regular concert. And then I've had, with that concert, I set it up with a sight reading and a clinic right after we give the concert. So, and then parents and community members are, they're asked to stay if they want, and they can see that process too. So it's an educational component for the community and for the parents as well for the students. I've always found that's I've done that pretty much every single time that we've gone to state, we've done a preview concert, which has been great. So
yeah, we're doing that tomorrow. So we basically fabricate the whole thing from busing the kids to the venue. They have a warm-up room, they have the concert on the stage, and then they have a sight reading room, and we have judges that come in. And it's helpful for the directors for sure, but it also really helps students. Ideally, I like doing that at least 2 weeks before the actual event happens, just because the students in their 2-week window. If you can get them in that 2-week window, they start to really focus up, and you still have time to fix some things. So if something just completely falls apart, you can make some changes in the intervening week and a half, 2 weeks before the actual contest happens. But it can be really eye-opening, especially when you're dealing with like levels, balancing levels between sections, to be able to get that experience in the venue that you're going to perform in. And also when you get students on stage in a place that they're not used to being, it can sound so different that they back off, they play scared. And so just getting them even on that very same stage, because they're children, they've not done this enough and they don't know how to adapt. It can make a really big difference. So those mock performances, I think, are beneficial.
Okay, holy cow. I sure wish I had the opportunity to actually go to the actual stage beforehand. That you're so lucky to get to do that, Darcy, because that was not something I ever had access to. And that was one of the big stressors, of course, is, how loud should the timpani be playing in this venue? Are they going to cover up the entire band, that kind of thing?
It helps. I think it helps the students that are nervous to face their nerves and realize, when I feel like this is how I react or how I respond, and I need to be able to learn how to handle that, right? And kind of taking the fear of the unknown out of the equation helps, I think.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so Darcy, you're getting your group ready.
Yeah.
Are there any tricks that you use, certain things that you always do with a group to make sure that they are going to be ready? Like, do you have something you could share with somebody that you think would be helpful to them?
I wish people could just come and watch. I think there's a lot that you can learn from just watching another experienced teacher teach that the experienced teacher doesn't even know they're doing. But I think it all begins with the way the kids even walk in the room. I know I've said that before, but you can tell a lot about the way a student is approaching the rehearsal or the performance by the way they approach just getting ready for rehearsals. So I am very high energy in my rehearsals, and I feel like keeping that energy and that intention going from the beginning will set you up to be successful for your performances. And then I don't let things slide at all. When I hear there's a problem, I'm making notes, I'm making changes right then and there. I don't let things just kind of go for a long time in preparation for that. And there's a lot of things like what kind of bow stroke and what kind of style. Some of those things I wait and do a little bit later, and that's to each his own. But it just depends on the piece of music. But more than anything, just psychologically, you want to keep the kids focused. You want them to be hungry for it. You want them to be envisioned for what they're a part of. You want them invested, emotionally invested, not just physically there. And you want everybody to feel like what they're contributing is valuable. So I do that in a million different ways. I'm sure Frank does the same. And I'd love to hear, Frank, how you prepare your students, some tips and tricks.
Yeah, well, a lot of things you're talking about are the same things we do. I'm high energy. I try to keep a really good balance within the rehearsal. I like to actually project scores up on. I've got a projector in my room that works really well for that. Projects right behind me, so I can put a score onto the projector, so the students can see like what's happening. I do a lot of singing. I feel that them singing, and this is a group that hasn't sang before, so you get the giggles and you get the kids that just don't want to do it, or they have to go to the bathroom right when you start singing, like, can I use the bathroom pass? And so I'm getting a little bit of that, but it's the consistency, Darcy, right? And Tim, it's doing it every day and making it just something that we do. It's taken a little while, but we're getting to the point where, now we sing, or we're buzzing. We're just taking out the mouthpieces and buzzing, or so those are kind of the little things that I do. But I really like giving them the whole picture of the score. I feel as a musician, we can hear those things, and we're trained to listen to those things. But these students, they don't have that ability just yet, and a lot of them might not get that at all. So when they see the whole score and they can see how their part fits, and how, okay, I have the melody here, I've got notes moving and no one else is really moving here. So it really is one of those things that I think opens up their eyes to their role within the group.
That's really great. Yeah, I do some similar things, not so much with the score, but just pointing out who's got the melody, or who's got, raise your hand if you're playing quarter notes, where, oh, look, you all are together, and having that awareness. Or I'll give them a bar, just silence before with the tempo, and I have them wait a bar together, and I have them come in without me and stay together. So there's a lot of knowing who to watch and what to watch for, so that they are thinking more about the whole and not just their part. And that helps a lot when they're on stage scared, or when they feel like they can't hear like they can in the classroom because it's so big. They know how to watch, what to watch for, and breathe and move together. And I love that you have your students sing. I do the same thing. And you're right. They are so self-conscious. They didn't sign up for singing, and here we are, we're singing. And but once they all know that they're going to do it and they're all doing it, it starts to work. And man, you want to talk about focusing. In the string world, pitch is such a big component, intonation. And when you can make them match pitch with their voice, then finding it on their instrument, it's usually a focus issue. If they're not tone deaf, it's usually just because they're not focused. And that's a great tactic.
Yeah. One of the other things that I think is a game changer for me, and it's been that way for probably about, 8 years now, is the harmony director. And I am not, sponsored or paid anything to say that. But that has been a game changer for my groups, especially when you're singing, and to know that, like my students are starting, they had no concept of, if I play the third, I have to lower that, or if I play the fifth, I have to raise that.
Right.
But making them confident in their singing, our brains are programmed to sing that perfectly, and we're there. Our instruments are not made to do that, and so that has been something that I constantly do in rehearsals, is to get that, and starting to hear the little changes when we get to a cadence. Students are starting to hear, and then I'll tell them, like, what do you have here? And also I do it in a way that I don't tell them. I ask them, like, hey guys, what notes are you playing? Oh, I got a B flat. I have an F. Okay. And I have a D. And so I'll just start throwing those notes up on the board, and I say, okay, what kind of chord can we make out of this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's B flat major. Okay, great. Who has the third? Write the 3 over your note, write the 5. And I think those are things that we all probably do, but I think there's a lot of things that I found myself doing where I'll skip over things because I don't have enough time in rehearsal, and so I think that all comes back to making sure that you prep and you really work out your rehearsals, give you some time to really talk about those things that make them ultimately better decision makers and better musicians.
That's so true. And the longer you teach, the more you're able to kind of jump to the conclusion. You know how to get to the solution faster. And so for those people that are watching today that are young teachers, it does get easier. You'll have more tools in your tool chest the longer you do this, to where you won't feel, in a moment where you're like, I don't know what to do. I mean, most of the time I've got 4 or 5 solutions for a problem. Or when I hear something, I know this is why this is happening, and how to solve it, or know that I need to get some help if I can't figure out how to solve it. But that's great. I love that you do that. That's really cool.
So you both have just sort of mentioned something in passing that you haven't said explicitly, and probably because you're like, well, duh, of course. But Frank, you mentioned in passing, like prepping for the rehearsal and knowing like you're prepared and you know what you're going to work on that day. I feel like sometimes rookie mistake is, well, let's play this one today and let's just start rehearsing. So you have to plan for what you're going to work on. Darcy, do you want to speak to that? Like, you have to prep and be prepared for what are we working on? What's the focus of this? Mapping that all out over time.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're going, all right, this is new. We're just going to get notes and rhythms. We're just going to line this up. But after you've gotten past that and the notes and rhythms are down, you're thinking through other things like alignment or style or bowings, maybe changing some phrasing, and how can you get that to happen, and why doesn't that sound right? So I do go in with a plan. Sometimes that plan is to just run everything and figure out where we are. Sometimes the plan is this whole section is suffering with intonation, and so that's our goal today, is to settle that. Sometimes the plan is to line up bow lengths and work on style. I mean, it's just, it's not, you can't just cut and paste that. You have to it has to be intuitive and organic, I think, as you go. If you're really, really listening with a critical ear and you're wanting to constantly improve, you're always thinking of, oh, this would sound so much better if we did this. And these students don't have this skill yet. They don't have this technique. So we need to focus on this technique so we can play this piece. And it all just kind of works together, I guess.
Frank, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So I think, a big component for me would be that, I don't know. I think going into those sorts of things like Darcy was just talking about is knowing what you're going to be. And first of all, I've been doing this 26 years, and there are days that I go in and I'm just like, oh, I am not planned for this. I am not prepped for this. So don't feel bad if you're out there and you feel like, oh, I'm not prepped for this, because there are some days it just, we're in education where you're getting called out for a pep rally, or you've got this going on or that going on, or 3 students have to go for the blood drive today, and then you have to go and help someone get into another room. So yeah, don't ever feel like if you're not prepared that you're not a great educator. But yes, I think it does get easier. You do have to know what's happening, and same kind of thing. It's just going through, I think, for me right now with a new group, and is you can't cut corners. And right now for us, it's tone. We're working on a characteristic tone. And I will spend a lot of time on that. And I guess being a little more, having a lot of time under my belt doing this is, I don't have that urge to rush, because I know that if we spend the time here, it's going to pay off. So an ounce of prevention, right?
Yeah.
So right now for me with this group, it is characteristic tone, and we work on it every day. And then we're starting to find that there are individual students that have that characteristic tone. So I say, okay, well, within your section, so-and-so has this is the tone we're looking for. And then match pitch. Okay, you're matching pitch, but we still don't sound like one person. Why? So there's a lot of questioning. I'm trying to engage the students and really get their ears going there, and they have great answers. They're like, okay, yeah, I don't sound like them because I'm playing a little too loud. My intensity is too much. I'm like, okay, well, back off a little bit. Okay, that's better, but you're still not matching. What is it? Well, my sound's a little more thin, or it's airy, or it's not as warm. So now they're using these descriptors, and we're pulling those. Those are the same things that are in our rubric. And the other thing is I've shared that rubric with them. We go through that. We talk about all the different areas. And I do mention that when we're in our rehearsals. So so I just think making sure as an educator, as a director, you can get so easily moving forward and just skipping the things that really are going to make a difference within your rehearsals. So
I totally agree. And I'm right there with you on tone. Right there. We don't go on until we've got the tone where we need it. Because it becomes a bad habit, right? Oh, that's good enough. And they want to focus on something else. And then they're still playing with a poor tone. Anybody can play with a poor tone. I know a lot of people would disagree with this, but I basically look at the sound as, my dad was an orchestra director, and he's the one that shared this with me. I like it. but you look at the sound as kind of like a big slab of marble or a big tree trunk, and you want to shape the sound, but you've got to start with the big slab of marble or the big tree trunk first. And then you kind of shape it the way you want to go. You hand a violin to a young, your player that's only played for a year, and they usually they'll just play really soft at first, and you have to teach them, fill up the sound, give us this big, full, robust sound, because that doesn't usually come naturally. And so then we can shape that. Then we can get softer. Then we can create some phrasing. But it's all, for string players, it's all right hand. It's bow control, bow speed, bow weight. And if you cut corners on that, like you just mentioned, Frank, if you cut corners on that, you can't go back. You can't reclaim some of that. You've got to set that stuff into motion at the beginning and make them do it. Don't let them get away with, oh, next time we'll get that right. No. You're allowing yourself to cut corners. And
yeah, Darcy, it's interesting you bring up that marble. I like that because I used kind of the same analogy today with my freshmen, but it's carving wood. So I said, you have to start with a good piece of wood. You can't just start gluing pieces of wood back on it. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Shape it as you go, but start with the big sound first. And then
I like the marble and the chiseling of the marble too. So
yeah. Same concept. But it works. It really does work.
Yeah. Creating that imagery, I think, really makes that connection sometimes.
Yeah, all this imagery is awesome. I love that. By the way, Darcy, I want to speak to something you said, which is I've just done coming out right now at the Marching Roundtable podcast is a whole series where I talked to private lesson teachers and performers on each instrument, and I asked them, okay, what would you want a band director or music instructor to know about your instrument? So the flute player talked about, well, I wish they knew this, and the clarinet player would say, oh, I wish they knew this about the clarinet. It's been really interesting, but you would probably not be surprised how many of them talk about getting young players to just play and be bold and be willing to put the air through the horn and giving them that sort of agency to go for it and not be afraid of messing up. Like this was a key component in almost every conversation I had was, like flute players. Well, if they're being timid, it's not going to work. They're never going to get that sound. So I love that you're talking about encouraging your students and giving them that sort of bold approach to let's make some music, right?
Right. And I this is also probably controversial, but I make my students play by themselves in front of the class. I don't just dump them all in it and just be sink or swim, good luck. We work towards that, but it is a regular thing so that every day, hey, can you play measure 35 for me? You all hear how that sounds? That's the sound we're going for. Or, just throughout, because we're all doing this together and we are here to learn an instrument to perform for people, not just for ourselves. And so giving them that confidence and that agency to go, it's okay to make a mistake. I would much rather you be confidently wrong than timidly right. We can work with some confidence. If you'll just be bold enough to just try, we will be here to support you through it. But that is a huge step for kids that so many are so reluctant to do, and creating that environment, going back to just building the culture to set us up to go be able to be at a festival that's adjudicated, creating that culture to go, this is a safe place. This is the expectation. You can do it. This is how. And we're all on this journey together. Can be so rewarding, but it is not easy.
I love that. Okay, so we've shared a lot of tips. Let's say here we are, it's the day of. So are there things that would be helpful for people to know? Well, this is what I do on the day of, or this is how we run that part. What are some tips that you guys would like to share on the specific day of the performance?
So if I can jump in, I think just one more thing prior to that is the logistics. I've seen some bands falter because of band director inadequacies, not being able to get the bus at the right time, or not scheduling a lunch stop, or not making sure that students have all their gear. And I think that is one thing I just wanted to say before we got to the day of, is as the band director, as the music educator, it's our responsibility to set them up for success. And I think that was something that I had to grow very quickly and felt a real responsibility because that wasn't my strong suit. I played saxophone. I was a saxophone player. I did the least amount of work possible. And I learned very quickly that, everyone's success is determined on my ability to keep things together and the logistics. So I think just making sure all of that is done. You have a checklist. I've put together checklists. I have checklists. I think just having that list is so important because you get so sidetracked with things.
Mm-hmm. Things will go wrong the day of. It's inevitable. I mean, that bus isn't going to show up. That kid's going to pass out. Somebody doesn't have their music. I mean, something's going to happen. So having that checklist and knowing you got everything done that needed to be done beforehand. Like, do you have to turn an excuse list to your campus? Do you have to have extra scores for the judges? Do those need to be numbered? I mean, there's just a lot of little things that it's so easy to forget. And then the day of, you've got to put out fires, but you also have to lead those kids into that experience. And I know for myself, I try to stay very high energy and just upbeat, and laser focused. Eyes on the prize. We're in here to play our hearts out. We're in here to make the most beautiful, expressive, emotional experience for our audience. We're going to have so much fun doing that, but we have all got to stay focused. And it starts with me being able to do that for them and remaining positive, even when some of those challenges come up, and they will. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darcy makes such a great point. It's like your job is to lead, and all those little things can take up your time and your energy. And I feel over the years, and this group is starting to happen, and I know, and then I'm going to go through these things like, we forgot to do this. We forgot to bring that. I had a trombone player going to a parade once. He forgot to bring his mouthpiece, and I didn't pack any extra mouthpieces. So I'm like, okay, this time I'm going to pack extra reeds, extra mouthpieces. But I also have put that onto the section leaders. So I really try to give that responsibility to the students. They just feel like they're more part of the group, and gives them the opportunity to grow and lead as well. So
yeah, that's great. It's always helpful. I've learned to always pack black socks.
And black tape.
Yeah. And because it's that kind of thing that, there's never enough bow ties. There's never enough black socks. Doesn't matter how many times you say it. I had it when I left the house this morning, but I lost it, banging on the band director's office. Hey, you got a pair of black shoes? Because that kind of thing happens. But, ultimately, that's not what you're going to remember at the end of the day, unless it's just ridiculous. You're going to remember that moment when there was that hush in the house after the last note, and you're just like, we got it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
You're going to remember that. That's what we want.
Yeah. One thing that I'm coming into a little bit of a play now, which I haven't had to think about for quite some time, is, I don't know if you guys have this, but we have eligibility.
Yeah.
And so students have to be eligible. I think for any new or band director that's out there that is a part of this and goes to festival, and you have those kind of components, make sure that you're looking into those and taking care of that prior and really understanding. So that's one thing that's challenging this past week for me. And luckily, in my case, I think we're going to be able to work through it, and students can become eligible. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think that you just have to build into the culture as well. So
yeah, we're dealing with eligibility. Actually, that came out today, and then that messes with your balance. If you've got ineligible kids, let's say you're taking an entire ensemble, like a string orchestra, for example, and you're playing a concerto grosso with soloists, and one of them's ineligible. What do you do? And that happened to me early in my career. It's like, whoa, how do you recover from that? And the more you teach, the more you realize, hey, it's really great to have something to fall back on. And an example, like, is there something we did in the fall in string world? You can do that. Is there something we did in the fall that we can maybe pull up that we could play now because my whole bass section has the flu? Or, having something to fall back on is helpful, especially when you're dealing with something like eligibility. You know, another thing, Frank, I wanted to know if you're dealing with this. I think this is a new thing with students. I don't remember having this much trouble previous to COVID, but it seems like students are having a hard time receiving constructive feedback from people they don't know. And getting them to a place where they're willing to hear what a judge's comment is. I don't know if you share judges' comments with your students after an event. I usually do. If they're worth sharing, and usually they are, because it's helpful. You know, we're here to learn and get something from another perspective that will make us grow. And I think as a student, that is an example of a good student, is someone that's malleable and pliable, that is willing to learn. But it seems like today kids are a little bit more like, I don't trust you. I think I know more than you know, you know. I don't know if have you experienced any of that lately?
Oh, absolutely, Darcy. Yeah. That is one thing I've noticed, especially coming back from COVID. And in particular, it's actually coming into this new position for me where I've been able to be direct with students, give them constructive feedback. I had to adjust my teaching a little bit because of they weren't used to that. And they took it personally, and I was like, this is not personal. This is to try to make you better, and this is what we do. And so I have noticed that too. Mm-hmm. I do share the comments. I think I go through them first. I'll listen, and then I just take and just put them into a Google Drive and just share them. And then I have students do reflections, and then from those comments, I'll ask them to actually create like a rehearsal plan for themselves and write down things like, oh, in this piece, and sometimes we make a game of it. We'll like say, well, how many times was your section called in the judge's comments? And that became a game of like, oh, well, there's a positive, there's a negative, and then we would keep track of that just for fun. That's when obviously when the culture of the group is in a good spot, you can do things like that, and it makes
right. Yeah. It's a challenge. I mean, being in a new district, brand new program, having them realize that I am for them, and I've been a director for my whole adult life. I'm used to being very direct, right, and used to having students that they believe me and they'll follow me to the end of the earth. So coming in to a brand new program where they're a little bit like, well, we're not quite sure about you yet, or we think we know a lot and we don't have to listen, and realizing that, you know, you can take the good and the bad, you know, teaching the kids, this person said you were out of tune and not together, this person said it sounded great. Okay, well, what's true? And it's not negative, it's knowledge. You're gathering together knowledge, and you can decide, yes, we were out of tune here, or just whatever. But realizing that they aren't being picked on, that they can be, they don't have to have their guard up, that they can be willing to receive and not be hurt. And it's okay to make a mistake. I think that's been a real surprising challenge with the current group of students that I've been working with.
Yeah, and I think it really just comes down to that trust. And for me, it's constant. It's constantly, every day, I just have to reassure them, like, I'm not going to put you in a situation where you don't feel successful. That's right. And then everything we do here is going to support you. And that's a challenge. It can be a challenge each day. So
that's true. Yeah. Cool.
Great stuff, guys. I love this. By the way, Gary was watching and he talked about preparation for the day of should be a part of the overall preparation. Mm-hmm. Too many programs affect how others see or hear them by their performance away from the stage. So you both have talked about building the culture of your program, but I do think that that's a good point that Gary makes is, making sure they're aware that the way they're perceived, just getting off the bus and moving around and being well-behaved, it all reflects. Mm-hmm. This is what we talk about a lot in the world of marching band, but I think it's true here as well.
Yeah, totally. You can see, as a judge, I would sit and watch orchestras walk on stage, and you can almost tell by the way they walked on what kind of performance you're going to get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is key, everybody. Like, this is really important. You can tell if they are going to have a good performance by the way they enter the stage. This is true.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't mean you have to like all be filed on a line and have it be all choreographed. It doesn't have to be something like that, but it's the intention with which you enter the stage. It's the energy that you walk onto that stage. You're performing even when you're not making a note. Even before, I mean, just as soon as you're there, people are watching you. And you're right. The way you carry yourself, the way you dress, the way you interact. Yeah, it's all a performance.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so in close, the last thing I'm going to ask you, and guys, I did not prepare them for this, so guys, I'm going to ask you to think back on one performance at concert festival with some group in the past that you've taught that was like, wow, I was so proud of that. That went so well. And then I want you to think about, do you have an idea of something specific that made that happen that time? So I'm going to give you a second to think about this. So some performance that you had in your history where you're like, okay, wow, that was so successful, or something about it made me remember it. And then do you remember what it was about that group of kids or that day or that choice of music or that particular section in your ensemble, something about it that sort of made that happen? I just think that would be an interesting way to end. Everybody, if you're watching this, thank you so much for watching this. And if you have found this conversation helpful, please let somebody know that it's here, because Darcy and Frank have been sharing great, helpful information. So Frank, I'm randomly going to ask you to go first with my final question here. Do you remember a performance that you would like to share, and why? Do you have an idea of why it ended up being so special?
Yes. One that comes in mind, I was preparing an American Elegy, the Frank Kelly piece. And it was a great year, and this was with a band in a school district prior to this, and everything about that performance just came together. And I think it really came down to all the prior work that we did with it. We brought in a lot of clinicians. And the most pivotal point in that was that we actually got to work prior to, we were at All Northwest. And so this was in February. We got to work with Dr. Alan McMurray. And my band was a demonstration band at All Northwest. And we got to work with him prior to that a little bit, and just to talk about everything that happened prior to that, to learn about the piece of music, why it was written. All of that focus was put into that. It really gave the students a deeper connection. And to be able to work with Dr. Alan McMurray, who also worked with Frank Kelly in writing that piece, was so amazing. And when we hit that stage, it was, those students knew that piece inside and out. They knew how they wanted it to be, and they played from the heart. And we didn't have to worry about notes. We didn't have to worry about rhythms. And that was probably one of the moments that I'll always cherish and remember, that we played that piece. And I wasn't thinking anything but just making the music as beautiful as possible. Mm-hmm. And we came off of that stage, and I felt like that was the best performance that I've had with a group. And we got a lot of people saying the same thing, like, wow, we just love that performance. That brought a tear to my eye. And the comments that we got from judges, it was Dr. Marcellus Brown, and I'll remember this, his comments on there to my students was, I have not heard that piece played that well and with that emotion, that kind of emotion, in quite a long time. And so that is probably the one time that just really is stuck with me, and has always been kind of that pinnacle of trying to get to that point.
Yeah, congratulations. What a wonderful gift that was that you gave to those students and to the audience. Isn't it wonderful in our profession when you get to that point where you're just about making the music with these students that you love, and it transcends all the worries about the notes and the rhythms and everything. That's, of course, the what we're all working toward. Darcy, do you have a story to share about your experience?
Yeah, I had an adjudicated contest, since that's what we've been talking about. So I'll share this one. We've all had, I'm sure, lots of really great experiences, but this one was an adjudicated, mandated, contest this was probably 2018. I'm thinking it was before COVID, but I had a really solid group of players. The culture was really strong. And one thing I didn't mention when we were talking about preparing, like in your rehearsals, preparing for performance, one thing that I do a lot is I go and look for professional groups that are doing the same piece. So I had done that year, and we were playing the Brandenburg Concerto No. 3. We were doing the final movement of that concerto. And we've been studying a group called A Far Cry. They are from Boston, and they usually perform standing. And so I thought, let's stand. So the Brandenburg Concerto No. 3 has 3 violin parts. So three sections of violins, 3 sections of violas, 3 sections of cellos, and then bass. So it's very, very thick, and it's very fast. And so we learned it, and then I said, okay, let's memorize it. So we memorized the first half. So we basically got the whole thing learned and memorized, and we played it standing, and it was the electricity in the room. I mean, it sounded like the piece was brand new, but it's hundreds of years old. But in the hands of these teenagers, it had this whole new life and this connection. And so, yeah, and then the judges' comments, one of the judges said, I have never seen anything like this before. I am floored by what I've just witnessed. This is top level, orchestra for the state kind of thing, which that's flattering to hear. But it was like, more than anything, it was just the satisfaction of being able to have everybody willing to work that hard, and then willing to perform at that level, and to do it in a way that was so fresh and innovative, with something that was so old. So that's something that I think about that performance a lot.
That's great.
Yeah.
And again, what a special experience that you gave those students that they will never forget. And this is why we do it, right?
Yeah.
That impacted their whole lives going forward. I would say both of the performances you both have just described. So it's really, really great. I've loved this conversation. Thank you, Darcy and Frank, so much for sharing your expertise. I think you've given us a lot of great information. So thanks everybody for watching. Like I said, if you know anybody that you think would enjoy this conversation and benefit from it, please let them know it's here. So Darcy and Frank, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And anyone that's out there watching or listening, feel free to reach out to any of us and Leaders Creating Leaders. If there's anything that they have questions, I'd love to talk more about this, because I think we just barely scratched the surface on things. So appreciate it. Our pleasure.
That's awesome. Thank you.